Abigail Gothard. I also go by Archer, and I use they, them pronouns. And I'm glad to be here today. While preparing for this sermon, Reverend Kent suggested a few topics to cover. One question he asked was, what does non-binary mean to you? And I think it's a great place to start off. Non-binary is a broad term that some people use to describe their gender identity. It can include femininity and masculinity in a spectrum, but also a big, broad sphere of all kinds of unimaginable gender. It is a word I like to identify with because it signifies to other people that my experience is not inside the common box of man or woman. It's somewhere else. I identify as non-binary as well as trans-masculine. My non-binary identity means that my gender is not contained within the gender binary, and I label myself as trans-masculine to signify that I've sought out medical transition to bring more masculinity into my life. But of course, not everyone has the same relationship to these labels as I do. Not all non-binary people identify with the transgender label, and that's okay. You might be more familiar with binary transgender identity. For example, someone born and labeled as a woman who transitions to being a man, like in the story today. What you might not know is that transition is not some straight line or exact path that all trans people follow. My gender therapist has described it as a few different stages of transition. For many people, what comes first is psychological transition. You recognize in your own mind, my gender doesn't align with what I was assigned at birth. You might recognize that certain experiences cause you discomfort due to inconsistency with how you feel and how you're seen. This is where you search for information and might privately experiment online with other pronouns or names. Next might be social transition. This can involve telling your friends and family about your identity, changing your name and pronouns, getting a haircut, or wearing new clothes. Then there are also changes to your body, hormonal and surgical transitions. Hormonal treatments can involve taking testosterone, hormone blockers, or estrogen, and there are a wide range of surgeries, including top and bottom surgery, but also facial feminization and other procedures. Although I just explained it as if it's an easy 4-step process, it definitely is not. Everyone goes through different stages of transition on their own time, and not everyone goes through the same thing. Coming out to yourself and to others is an ongoing process that never really ends. And medical transition is not always accessible to people due to health conditions or monetary factors. Some people are concerned with the idea of passing as a certain gender. For some, it is physically safer if they are able to be seen as a man or a woman and not be clocked or seen as transgender at all. But not all people want that, which I think is especially true for non-binary folks. As I said before, I label myself as trans-masculine to signify the way I sought out medical treatment to bring more masculinity into my life. I've been on a low dose of testosterone for almost 2 years now, and I'm so grateful for the way that it has changed my body and the masculine traits I now present. And it's important to note that not everyone needs to or wants to share this kind of personal information. Again, everyone's story is different. I know multiple non-binary people who had top surgery, which I don't want, before even considering taking testosterone. Each individual is the only one who can decide how to affirm their own gender. I personally came to identify as non-binary in 2020. The pandemic was raging, and despite social distancing, I found flourishing relationships in online queer communities. I was seeing more representation of queer women on TikTok, as well as trans and non-binary folks, people exploring what gender meant to them. I was also finishing up my first year at a historically women's college and considering, what does it even mean to be a woman? That fall, I took a gender and religion course, and in spring I was taking Making Sense of Power course. I had all the relevant theory background for this. I believe that at that point in the pandemic, a lot of people were realizing the performative aspect of gender. Yes, I'm referencing Judith Butler. I'm using a bit of the gender queer theory background. For those first few weeks, we didn't go to school or work, and we were told not to physically spend time with other people. We stayed inside, and there was suddenly no longer a need for presenting our bodies to anyone other than ourselves. For some people, this might have meant not showering and forgetting to put on deodorant. But for others, it meant trying out a makeup style and not worrying what a mean girl at school might say. Or looking in the mirror after layering a button down on top of a t-shirt to see if your chest looks flatter when you turn to the side. With all of this swirling through my mind, I reached out to friends of mine who I knew that identified as non-binary. I asked about their experiences, and I realized I felt similarly. I didn't need to define myself by the way I was born or the person I was told to be growing up. I realized I can be anyone I want to be. I came out to Grayson and my best friends and my therapist, and eventually my whole family and the general public knew by 2021. Although I didn't come out till then, I knew about non-binary identities long before 2020. I'm a lucky human who was born and raised a UU, and I participated in every OWL class from elementary school up through high school. As my mom already said, 10 out of 10 recommend to any parents out there. Please take your kids to OWL. I learned all about gender, sex, and sexuality, all the important things. People of any age can know their gender. Some people really didn't know until they were late into adulthood. Other trans people come out very young, or if they weren't able to, they definitely knew they were trans. Folks will say, I should have known I was trans when I did XYZ as a kid. And I didn't have a ton of those moments, but one of them was when I was in OWL, and we learned about gender and sex. They explained how not everyone is born the same way. Most people are born with a penis or a vagina, but about 1.7% of people are born intersex, with a combination of sex characteristics. I was fascinated when I learned that, and I remember thinking, wow, that's so cool. I wish I was intersex. I also knew that I identified as pansexual in middle school, while many of my friends identified as bisexual. It's a subtle difference accompanied with an appropriate amount of internet discourse, which I will not get into, but I see it as bisexual equals attraction to two or more genders, and pansexual equals attraction regardless of gender. I was always confident that I was not bisexual, definitely pansexual, and sometimes I chalked it up to liking the pride flag colors better. Gender is different from sexual orientation, but they do have a complex relationship to one another. Sexual orientations are generally defined by your gender as well as the gender you're attracted to. For example, homosexual attraction to the same gender as your own. But as I've grown up, I realized that I've never been particularly aware of gender. I've never really seen the importance of gender. I care much more about humanity itself and who someone is rather than what gender they are. And that applies to myself as well. My gender sometimes fluctuates and sometimes is undefinable. Sometimes I feel like a man, sometimes I feel like a pretty girl, sometimes I'm neither, or both, or just flesh and bones. But for now, I'm content in saying that I'm always non-binary.
Hi, I'm Cole. I use he, they, it pronouns. And hang on, this is not aligned. I've been here a while, but haven't been in a while, so I'm back. One time, about halfway through my main gender crisis, I was in the car, and my parents asked me a question. So, what is gender anyway? I blue screened. I had no idea what to say. Gender is everywhere, but when you get down to it, what is it? It's not birth sex, it's not pronouns, it's not presentation. So what then? My identity is weird. I'm just going to say it. My identity is weird. I don't actually identify as non-binary, though it acts as a decent summary. My current identity is trans and agender with a masculine lean. Why am I wearing feminine clothes and makeup then? It's cross-dressing. Yeah, it's weird. I have no gender, I like to be seen as masculine, and I like to dress feminine. Sometimes even I don't get it. Sometimes other trans and non-binary people don't get it either. I don't expect everyone to understand it. I use simplifications a lot for that reason. I'm trans or non-binary or prefer not to answer when I fill out forms. I'm he, they without a long explanation to acquaintances. I use the women's restroom. I'm yeah, so when someone asks why I'm wearing feminine clothes if I'm a trans guy. I rarely reveal that its is one of my pronoun sets because people find it weird, and I debated for some time whether to include it here or not. I have a ton of slightly different summarizations of my identity that I use for different groups of people. I love labels. I love generalizations. I love being hard to explain. I realized I was a self-proclaimed gender goblin starting in April 2021. I have this date due to a Google Doc I found. It's in impact font, which is the meme font. It ends with a random comment at the bottom that I might be trans because, and I quote, "Suddenly I'm finding trans Reddit to be the most amazing, welcoming place ever," with 3 question marks. Apparently, I was considering changing my name and pronouns as early as December 2021. In February 2022, a queer wiki was under the threat of being shut down, and I joined a team of volunteers to move the contents to a new wiki site. This meant I spent a lot of time on the site, and sometimes I'd take a few minutes break and read the first paragraph of whatever page I was archiving. And I was fascinated by the vastness of experience and identity. August of that year was the first time I felt dysphoria. It didn't take me long to connect that this was a gender thing, and I started researching identities. Over the next several months, I went through a lot of phases. There was the, okay, maybe I'm not entirely a girl, but mostly a girl phase. The gender is a lie phase, the boy phase, the I have every gender but it's weird phase, and then finally landed on no gender at all somehow. All that research I did on gender to figure myself out has turned me into something of a walking gender dictionary. One of my favorite hobbies is listening to people on Discord who are starting to question their identities and offering potential terms to look up and try out. One of the servers I'm in has a bot that lets me easily do wiki calls to pull up web pages for people. Talking about the vast experience of gender and identity makes me happy because it's so much broader than many people think. It's like discovering other paint colors exist when you've only been painting with one color your whole life. I love answering questions about gender. Educating people about this field of knowledge I've poured hours into knowing is so fun to me. That said, not everyone wants to have their identities pried into. I tend to act as an identity explainer where possible so that others don't have to explain when they don't want to. The most important thing for an ally to know is how to refer to someone, that is, names and pronouns. A lot of us that are in the general space of non-binary identities will have identities that might not make sense. I even coined some terms to try to describe my identity. I had experiences that I couldn't find anywhere on that wiki of thousands of terms, and I don't expect those experiences to make sense to many others. It's okay to not understand someone's identity as long as you don't disrespect it. No matter how strange an identity sounds to you, you probably are close to someone who has that identity or a similar one. Odds are, that person probably is or was me. I also want to make a note based on some past experiences. It's okay to ask for someone's pronouns. It's not as awkward as it feels, and it's often appreciated. If you're not sure if someone is out, you can ask in private or text them. You can ask even if you're pretty sure the person is cis. They might not have an answer for you. I know I didn't have an answer for my friends for months, but it will be appreciated and it'll tell them that you're an ally. Lost my place, sorry. More personal questions like transition plans or biology shouldn't be asked. If the person wants to tell you, they will, but it's not your place to pry about their body. Questions like how to refer to someone, though, name, pronouns, preferred terms like dude, for instance, are all good things to ask of anyone, really. on the note of pronouns, someone's pronouns might not be ones you've heard before, like ze, them, or vi, vir, or sky, sky. These are neopronouns, and every neopronoun user has a different reason for using them, but they usually work like any other pronoun. If you're not sure, you can always ask how it's used and get an answer, something like, I saw them at the store today. I'll finish by coming back to my initial question. What is gender? Gender is a lot, and also nothing. It's a social construct. It's a label that makes the user happy to identify with. It's a flag that goes with that label. If you're lucky, it was made by someone with a good color sense. It's a web page on a wiki that describes you that you can send to other people with similar experiences and have them understand you better. It's a domain of self waiting to be explored. According to my friend, gender is a letter noodle soup, and people choose the letters that make their noodle soup taste the best. And honestly, yeah, kind of beautiful, isn't it?
Wow. I'm looking at the hour and I'm thinking, how can I cut the summary page? But wow, those were something else. I'm guessing some of you think I'm up here because my kiddo has just talked about being non-binary. Well, yes, and it's so much more than being Archer's mom. I taught religious education classes to both the Colias and Archer like 10 years ago when they were in elementary school. And watching these two young people grow up here at Tapestry, I'm proud of them. And I stand in awe of their ability to share experiences on such a personal topic. I am going to try to cut my words short, but my perspective here was from a parental perspective, and also to talk a little bit about how to be an advocate and an ally. When Abigail came out, I did have a pretty typical parental reaction. Oh gosh, they told their siblings, cousins, and online friends before they told us. Are they afraid to tell us? I must be a bad parent. Nope, it's not about me. It's their life, their comfort level, their story to tell. Everyone has their own timing and order. It's hard enough to grow up, let alone to do so in a condemning environment that is unsafe for those that don't conform to societal constraints. 3 chilling factoids. 82% of transgender individuals have considered killing themselves. 40% have attempted suicide, with suicidality highest among transgender youth. Finally, less than 40% of trans youth say they live in a gender-affirming home. Our trans kids need to be supported. I want to give you 3 definitions. I've learned that it's not the marginalized folks' place to make the change in the world. Being marginalized makes it harder, which is why I'm trying to be an accomplice, different than an ally. An ally is someone who's not a target of oppression but still works to end it, a helper, a person or group that provides assistance in an ongoing struggle. As an ally, I ask people their pronouns, and I carry books with me that I give to help raise awareness. After the service, you'll find a book group out there, and these speakers are willing to answer questions at the table outside. An advocate is a person who publicly supports change or policy. It's about recognizing your privilege and then using it in solidarity. There's a YouTube personality who suggests sometimes people get hung up on the word privilege. Privilege doesn't mean that you are rich or that you've had an easy life. All it means is that there are some things in life you will not experience or have to think about because of who you are. I'm privileged because I'm straight and white. So all you advocates out there, let's write those letters. Lately, I've been writing emails to boards of education because there's a lot of misinformation being spread about right here in Orange County on the parental notification policies. See the table outside. An accomplice is someone who supports a target of oppression when they are going out on a limb, when they are putting ourselves at conditions that risk our own comfort and well-being. In a court of law, the word accomplice has a negative connotation, as in someone who's assisted someone else in wrongdoing. In the context of race and social justice work, an accomplice is someone who assists others in creating a space of inclusion, equity, and safety for all, often at their own social and/or professional standing and physical well-being. There's a variety of ways people do this: an ad in the paper, a demonstration, confronting leadership over unwelcoming practices. I get nervous standing up in public. At the Capistrano board meeting Tuesday night, describing my healthcare job and relevant expertise in public on the record and in front of a potentially ugly crowd, but I do this because I hope to make a difference. I ask you to consider your role in making our society more just, more humane. What is your ability to move from being curious to being an ally? Ask someone their pronouns. If you haven't seen them in a while, ask them again. Could you move from allyship to advocate? Take a book from the table and share it with someone who could use it. Ask questions. Wanting to be an accomplice, I try to stand up when there is a void. I encourage you to use your written and spoken words. In closing, Reverend Kent said it very eloquently in his 2017 Gender Beyond Binary sermon. His words are just as important and powerful 6 years later. And I quote, "Language is not a game or a burden. It is an opportunity to understand people in more accurate and more expansive ways. It is an opportunity to better understand the vivid diversity of the sacred that is manifest in all of our beautiful human family." Amen to that.